Welcome to the Aspire Technology Partners Techcast, a technology trends webinar series. This series is brought to you by Cisco. Aspire Technology Partners is a Cisco Gold certified partner with Cisco Master Specializations in collaboration, security, cloud, and managed services. I'm your host, Josh Dolby. The incredible WebEx lady in the sky has told me that we are now recording the session. So thank you. Good morning and welcome to everybody who's joined us. And again, for people who are just joining, it looks like we still got people joining in. That's fantastic. We start these a couple of minutes late just to make sure in your busy schedules that we can try to fit in. Today's topic of conversation and discussion, we're loosely calling Wi-Fi 6 and U. Again, we like to make this interesting. We don't want to just go over sort of product or overly technical updates. We've got some really incredible presenters, a couple of experts that are going to be joining me here that we're going to sort of quasi-interview. We look forward to getting some really interesting information out of them. Our purpose here is to try to make sense of this latest Wi-Fi standard to help those of us who are in business decision-making positions to determine how our organizations interact and integrate with this kind of technology. I will also be conducting a couple of additional webinars, and we've got a whole new schedule that's going to be refreshed here shortly. So in March, we're talking data with the Aspire Practice Lead for Data Center, Mr. Kevin Leahy. In April, we're going to be talking about security and identity services with the one, the only Mr. Robert Costanza. Again, I expect those presentations and that content to be almost as interesting as this content. So you're really in for, I think, a really good ride today. Again, if you have questions, please take advantage of the Q&A panel. We love your questions. I think that's what keeps this interesting and exciting. In case you can't tell, this is actually a live presentation. So your questions as they come in, I will do my darndest to share them live on the air. First, I'd like to make sure everybody knows a little bit about Aspire. So here at Aspire, we like to break our technical capabilities up into different practice areas. I'm sure you're mostly familiar with this kind of concept. Number one, digital architectures. Under digital architectures, we find enterprise networks. So everything from your core route, switch capabilities, wireless oftentimes falls under that. Meraki, one of the gentlemen in the room today that we're talking to, Mr. Cody Harris, is the director of that element of our organization. So if you have questions about that, he's here and he's live with us. Collaboration. We've talked on this webinar series about collaboration in a couple of different formats. We've talked about things like WebEx calling. We've talked about working from home and some of the strategies there that I personally like to employ, and I'm sure that you do too. And we talked about things like WebEx. We're using, again, Event Center here today, incredibly powerful tool. Cybersecurity. Cybersecurity is Mr. Robert Costanza's sweet spot, and he's going to talk with us about, again, identity services here in an upcoming Techcast. Many elements of cybersecurity, north, south, east, west, firewalls, intrusion prevention, file trajectory, the list goes on. We'll get into some really good things there. Data and cloud, Mr. Kevin Leahy next month talking about data, not just your data center, but data, how your organization is working with different services. Again, my question oftentimes is, what does the cloud mean to you? It means many things to many people. The Internet of Things and the extended enterprise. We did a really fantastic Techcast element with Mr. Brian Shalacy a couple of months ago, where he talked about a lot of the types of information that we can capture from various sensors that are put on your network and how to secure those things as you look at your real estate investments. So our practice areas, we also, again, have an incredible managed services arm, a SOC and NOC 24/7. That's just a little bit about us. So who do we have here today? Of course, you've got yours truly, myself, Josh, out of Cambridge here, collaboration specialist and client director. We have the one, the only, Mr. Cody Harris, the director of our digital architectures team in Eatontown, New Jersey, and Mr. Kyle Turk, principal consulting engineer, who is, and Kyle, I hope you don't mind if I say this, absolutely a wireless expert. And I think based on our conversation just before the session, I learned a few things already. I think we're all going to learn a few things as we get in here. So please, if you have hard technical questions or really interesting ones, we've got the right people here. Gentlemen, would you like to introduce yourselves? Just say hello for a moment before I sort of get us into anything further. Let me just make sure you are unmuted.
Perfect. Thank you, Josh. Yes, as you mentioned, my name is Cody Harris. My title is Director of Digital Architectures, right, which boils down to I oversee pre-sales and post-sales engineering for our enterprise networking, wireless, route switch, security teams. And I also dabble in some of the data center IoT stuff, but Working with Turk for the last 5 years on continuing to develop and provide wireless services for our customers. In the wireless space for about 10 years now, I would say.
Hi everyone, I'm Kyle Turk. I'm a principal consulting engineer here at Aspire. I'm specialized mostly in wireless, as Josh said, wireless and security. And we've been developing our wireless portfolio for quite some time, as Cody was saying. And we've started some new initiatives around IoT and IoT performance and capabilities.
So Kyle, you get involved in a lot of different technologies, it sounds like, is my guess, yes?
Yeah.
Excellent. Okay, we're going to ask some fun facts here of again, the audience. I want people to guess, and I won't, no answers yet, but please put this in the Q&A or the chat panel. Which of these two gentlemen here with us was a math major, okay? College, which of these gentlemen was a math major? I want you to go ahead and put those answers in there. Just take a guess as we go along, okay? So it's just a fun one. You could probably all guess who was a philosophy major, okay? And that's a different thing. But anyway, okay, let's get back to some of the content here and sort of get this show on the road further. So our agenda today, and again, I'm going to do my best to guide us through some of these things, or to, questions as they come up from our audience, to pose those questions to the team. What is Wi-Fi 6, first off, right? It's a term that I see and I say, okay, I feel like somebody's simplifying something here and trying to make it easy for me to consume it in a way to say, there's this thing. What is it exactly? How will Wi-Fi 6 benefit our users and our organizations, right? What are the ways that it might be implemented in order to make it make sense for our organizations, whether we're talking about a commercial entity and we're talking about sort of an industrial and manufacturing floor, some pharmaceuticals that I'm dealing with, or we're talking about the colleges and universities where we've got campuses with a lot of people coming and going and a lot of different types of equipment and technologies that come in, not just Xboxes and PS4s, but also to every manner of mobile device, and then to some sort of big iron that may be there on campus for various research purposes. Let's talk about the applications for the Wi-Fi 6 standard. Of course, how can Aspire assist you, our fine viewer and listener, in possibly deploying Wi-Fi 6? And then we can talk a little bit about additional enhancements. I think that this is where we'll get into some of the more deeper sort of technical questions. Kyle, I'm going to look at you for that there. Cody, I'll look at you as well for that. Both of you will ask you some questions here, so just be ready. And then any questions that you might have that we don't get a chance to sort of do live, I'll try to pose to the team afterwards. So again, please hit that Q&A panel or the chat panel if you have any questions as we go along. So gentlemen, could you tell us a little bit here, what exactly is Wi-Fi 6?
Absolutely. Yeah, so I think, Wi-Fi 6, one of the most interesting parts to me, honestly, in regards to Wi-Fi 6 is, and you see it listed up here in the top, right? So when we talked about Wi-Fi 5, when we talk about Wi-Fi 5 and 6, I mean, it's just different terminology for IEEE 802.11 standards, right? Wi-Fi 6 was 802.11 AC. Wi-Fi 5 was 802.11 AC. Wi-Fi 6 is called also in the nerd terms 802.11 AX. In Wi-Fi 5, what we were trying to do was get the highest throughput possible, right? And we were able to achieve some really good throughput there. We're, I think, about 3 gigs theoretical maximum, give or take, on the Wi-Fi 5 side. Wi-Fi 6, very interestingly enough, is predominantly developed in order to create less congestion and high efficiency within your Wi-Fi environment, right? That having been said, it's also quite a bit faster. So theoretical maximums on Wi-Fi 6 is somewhere in the range, again, of about 9 gigs. These are theoretical. If you actually achieve these, let us know. We'd be very impressed. But those are the maximums that we would see. Some of the ways that we kind of create that additional efficiency is with technologies such as OFDMA, right? It kind of increases the efficiency and lowers the latency. MIMO, right, which is the term that we use, but ultimately that's multi-user, multiple input, multiple output. What that means is the access point can serve multiple clients at a time. It's not just acting as a hub anymore. Parallel processing, and basically what that comes down to is BSS coloring, right? So now we're able to leverage different colors within the available bands of Wi-Fi that basically tells a device whether or not it should listen to that particular transmission or ignore it, right? So we can have now devices transmitting on the same band. to different applications, and that's really cool, really awesome. 1024 QAM, right? And we'll get into that a little bit later on what that means. But 1024 QAM basically means that we can put more data on each transmission. And then one of the parts that I think of as guys that are kind of also in the IoT realm, target wake up time is a really interesting technology, because what that does is it improves battery life by scheduling when transmissions and receiving of transmissions will occur. So we don't have a device that's constantly listening and saying, oh, I'm going to wait for a transmission to happen. A negotiation has occurred between that endpoint and the access point, and it says that target wake up time will be at this time. That will be your time to transmit. Until that time, you can shut your power off at that time, power it back on, and then it will be your turn to transmit. So that's at a very high level. I think Turk could probably dive in a little bit deeper on those.
So orthogonal frequency division multiple access, the first one on our list up here, that's a new term and a new type of transmission that AX brings us. AC was orthogonal frequency division multiplexing, and basically what's happening is that the OFDMA is allowing the radios and the receivers to split up that single carrier. The single carrier that OFDM was. Now we have what's called resource units, and those resource units allow us to pack more users onto that signal at one time. Instead of just modulating a single carrier frequency, we're able to pack more of those users in one signal. Same thing with multiple user MIMO. Of course, in AC, MIMO was just the downlink, but now we can use multiple users on the uplink and the downlink. Target wake time is especially important to deal with scheduling those radios to turn on and off, and making sure that those users are able to determine when the best time to talk is. And a lot of these technologies are based on organization and scheduling of those resources that we haven't really gotten to up until this point.
Question, target wake time. So does that mean that target wake time is applied to something like a mobile device to save that kind of battery? Is that what you mean? Or do you mean like other, okay, you're nodding your head to that.
Absolutely. Target wake time is specifically been brought about for IoT devices, because IoT needs that extra energy not to talk a lot. They don't use a lot of time usually, and they send small amounts of packets. So you want to make sure that you're saving power on those small devices that don't have a lot of power. It can also translate over to your mobile devices, except those need to support this newer technology. And we're just now getting into the latest and greatest devices starting to support Wi-Fi 6.
Yeah,
so that's a benefit then for both sort of an industrial IoT style device. So something that could be like using LoRa, right? That's got a battery in it that's supposed to last, 10 years, and it's down, buried someplace under a manhole cover or whatever. That way we can put it in there and just kind of set it and forget it. Yep. And that can also affect my new Apple iPhone 17 or whatever it is that I'm supposed to buy next.
Yeah, I mean, the applications can be different, but ultimately the results are the same, right? So from your mobile device, what are you trying to do? You're trying to get a day out of it, right? Let's be honest. You want to get a day out of your mobile device if you can in terms of power.
I want to watch TV, play video games, get a day out of it. I think that's what people are trying to do these days.
Yeah. So, obviously your mobile device, you can plug it in at night, you can plug it in during the day, you can recharge that device. From an IoT perspective, very often, to your point, right? You're putting that IoT device somewhere out into the environment, right? It has a limited battery life. Very often, I think the sensors, once the battery life runs out, you throw it out, right? Maybe it served its purpose for those 10 years. But ultimately, yes, it's trying to, either way, you're trying to conserve that battery time so that device can last longer and longer. From an endpoint or a mobile device perspective, you're trying to get a day out of it, right? From a IoT device, you're trying to get potentially years or decades out of it.
Okay. Wow. Thanks. That's really interesting. Now, So multiple user, the MIMO piece, right? So MIMO, as I recall, that was something that kind of started a couple of years ago. The idea that, hey, we can have multiple antenna, or some of the devices started to come with multiple antennas, and it made it noticeable. This sounds like it's taking much better advantage of that capability. Give me a little tiny bit of insight into that one, please.
Sure.
Yeah, so I mean, both multiple user MIMO and OFDMA are taking that transmission and allowing multiple people to converse at the same time, essentially. OFDMA is splitting one signal carrier up into 234 signal carriers, those resource units. MIMO is not only allowing a downlink of multiple users this time, because AC allowed a downlink from the access point to the user to share more channels, whereas in this case, we're doing it both ways now, in the uplink and the downlink. So both of those together are opening the door to more throughput, but it's really more about keeping the transmission as efficient as possible. And the longer that we go and the more that we build upon these two frequency bands, 2.4 and 5 gigahertz, the more you'll see the evolution of the actual technology in the transmission, and not really in the hardware, but building out how to transmit better on those bands. If that makes sense.
So again, getting to greater fidelity, right? So you can really tune what's happening to a much, much deeper degree. Okay. So move on to the next. We'll talk about the benefits of Wi-Fi 6. Before we do, I'd like to give our audience the answer to our first question, and the answer is none of our presenters were math majors. Thank you. So gentlemen, would you mind? Actually, that was a trick. Mr. Cody Harris, math major. We have another question coming up for the audience. So let's talk a little bit about the benefits of Wi-Fi 6. So to an organization, right? You gentlemen deal with an incredible swath of organizations, if I can say it like that, where you have, as I implied, we have industrial style customers, commercial customers with manufacturing plants, where you see, like, again, the industrial Bluetooth and all these sort of different standards and capabilities, things that Mr. Shalacy had talked about a couple of months ago with us, to the college campuses, where you've just got a massive flood of students coming at different times of the day, and then for 3 months a year it's pretty quiet by comparison, to cities, counties, and state government entities, where you have other needs from a wireless perspective. So tell us a bit about how you think Wi-Fi 6 can benefit these different types of organizations. Not to put you on the spot, but actually, I should read our next question too before you do that. Which of our presenters have active amateur radio call signs? So please go ahead and put your answers in the chat or Q&A panels. Gentlemen, benefits of Wi-Fi.
Yeah, I'll run a couple. So kind of depends on your application, right? And we're going to go over applications later in the Techcast, but there's certain areas where you're going to see the most benefits out of Wi-Fi 6, right? One of those being kind of high density environments, right? So think of it from the perspective, and this is what we were talking about before with OFDMA and multi-user MIMO. Some of the benefits are traditionally when let's say you had 10,000 people in a stadium, right? Those 10,000 people, they are trying to transmit wireless, they're trying to access YouTube, they're trying to post on Facebook that they're there at the game. Traditionally, what would happen is that actually the access points that were put within that area have to wait for those users to transmit one at a time. And if you have 10,000 users, and let's make it up, just to make the math easy, let's say you have 10 access points in that stadium, you now have 1,000 users per access point. So if you are user 1,000, right, and user 1 to 999 are transmitting, you are waiting, right, your turn in order to transmit your your packets, right, or your frames, we should say. So that's what these technologies do is allow multiple users to send transmissions at the same time, both in the uplink and the downlink, right? So that's where we talk about increased network efficiency, less congestion. No longer are you waiting, right, to transmit. In the old kind of wait and listen technologies on wireless, a device would power on its radio, it would listen. If nobody was transmitting, it would transmit. If somebody else was transmitting, it would power down its radio and it would wait a certain amount of time until it would put that radio back on to listen again. So you're going to see a lot of benefits in the stadiums or kind of high density Wi-Fi. Maybe it's in a college campus, right, where you have high density areas, maybe a quad or something like that, where you may have large groups of users coming together. Also potentially in classrooms, large classrooms where you may have 3 or 4 or 500 students there, right? As we talked about with kind of IoT devices specifically, the increased battery life is certainly a huge component and a part that that we are excited about as Wi-Fi engineers. The increased battery life of these devices, higher speeds, obviously. I mean, as kind of tech nerds, I mean, higher speeds are always awesome, right? I mean, there's no time where you want lower speeds. You always want higher speeds. And then you do get some increased security with WPA3. And not to say that WPA3 is specifically part of the Wi-Fi 6 standard, but to say that WPA3, and you correct me if I'm wrong, that is WPA3's first being implemented in Wi-Fi 6, right? So if you can jump in and expand a little bit on that, like WPA3 and how it better secures.
Yeah, I mean, they're increasing the capabilities around WPA. They're introducing some new methods, sharing pre-shared keys between different devices and having groupings of different devices with different pre-shared keys. It's more encryption and more security. And I think that that's been a parallel development to Wi-Fi 6, that we're going to see a lot of adoption in that going forward.
So you present the idea, and I was thinking of a student union that I was at a college campus yesterday, right? Okay. Where sometimes there's nobody there, sometimes there are 500 or 600 students, faculty, staff, everybody sort of moving around and doing things. So that is the kind of location, physical space that is going to absolutely benefit from this technology, it sounds like. Absolutely. Where all those radios will be able to sort of be sending and receiving more simultaneously as opposed to before. Right. When we get into industrial settings where you have other sort of technologies that may be conflicting, or actually where I am right now, this office here, there are multiple businesses across 8 floors here, and there's a ton of wireless interference. Does Wi-Fi 6 help with both of those situations where I made industrial interference and or additional signal interference from other networks that are nearby?
I think that a lot of these features and making the Wi-Fi 6 standard more efficient, I think you'll see that if you want to try to get these faster speeds, that it kind of, the interference is kind of going to affect you even more than it used to. And having said that, I think that if people are looking to deploy AX in their environments, I think that, taking the advantage of a wireless predictive survey to determine how much that interference is going to play in your environment based on the fact that you want to get these higher speeds with denser modulation techniques, you'll need to have a cleaner environment. Your signal to noise ratio will probably need to be better than it is now. But that isn't to say that if you really aren't interested in those higher throughput and more efficient speeds, that most of the rest of the bands will operate similarly to the way they have. But when you go up to those higher frequencies, or not frequencies, those higher transmission rates and data rates, you'll probably have to make sure that your noise is taken care of.
Yeah.
So much like a race car, if we're pushing it over 150 miles an hour, we need to strip down some of the excess things like the radio that we don't need in the car for it to go fast in order to have sort of more fidelity. So does that, I think this is the answer, on the head end, right, the wireless controller side, and on the actual AP, that sounds to me like, again, to benefit from this technology, I need to have a very current generation AP and a current generation controller. And so if I'm in a refresh cycle right now, it's probably one of those moments where it's worth it to investigate, what are we doing for APs? Let's not buy non-Wi-Fi 6 capable APs.
100%. Yep, 100%. I mean, we have a slide a little bit later that goes into the devices that are already released, right? That are Wi-Fi 6 capable, and you're going to see there's going to be more and more absolutely every day. I don't know, within 6 months or so, you probably won't see any non-Wi-Fi 6 chipsets being.
Yeah, I mean,
keep me honest there.
everyone is been making moves to move to Wi-Fi 6. Broadcom, Qualcomm, Intel, Samsung, Apple, Ruckus, Aerohive. Everyone's making products. The Apple iPhone 11 that's coming out, that's going to not fully support AC, but it's going to have some functionality and capabilities. I think that if you're upgrading your network, I think you could take care of the Wi-Fi 6 answer by upgrading your access point, upgrading your controller. You're still going to see some benefits. But, you might want to take into consideration, if you want to see those full bandwidth, the full throughput from this new standard, that you're also probably going to have to look at your wired infrastructure. Talking about multi-gig, getting 5 gigabits to your access point instead of 1 gigabit. And there's more components to think about, especially now because of the high throughput that these APs are going to provide us. And not just high throughput for one individual user, but we're talking about trying to cram more users onto one access point. So that's definitely going to require a bigger pipe.
And one other thing to note is that, obviously, when the IEEE develops these standards, they're always backwards compatible, right? So even if you invest in Wi-Fi 6, access points and controllers, and maybe you have, let's say, 25% of your devices within your environment are Wi-Fi 6 capable, the other 75% are Wi-Fi 5 or Wi-Fi 4 capable, right? No problem, it's going to operate without any issues. Your user just won't see some of that additional benefit and feature, right? But it absolutely will work just as a Wi-Fi 5 access point and controller would.
Very, very interesting stuff. We do have additional questions coming in, but I just want to remind everybody our most recent sort of quiz question, right? Which of our presenters have active amateur radio call signs? So please try to answer that if you would. I'd love to see some folks trying to answer that. Got a couple of answers coming in. So, gents, shall we talk about the adoption of Wi-Fi 6? And actually, Kyle, I forgot to mention, Cisco also makes devices that are Wi-Fi 6.
Yes, they do.
And Meraki. Yep. And Meraki.
Okay.
Meraki was one of the first on the scene, right? Cisco followed up pretty closely behind them, but Meraki, they went to market very quickly on the standard for sure.
That's that I think that's very important to know. Again, so if I have, and back to your point, right? So I have a specific customer I'm thinking of, and they say, look, we're going to build out a new location. Their existing infrastructure, right, which is Meraki, they don't have to necessarily completely tear it down and rebuild it. They can keep as is and look, to your point, to upgrading to multi-gig and some of the core. But when they build new, we should be talking Wi-Fi 6. They should be putting Wi-Fi 6 capable APs and control capabilities in that new space.
Yeah, no question. If you take a look at this graph here, right? Let's just take a guess at the number of iPhone 11s, Samsung Galaxy 10s, right, and the Dell and HP laptops within our current environment right here. It could be 70 to 80% of all the devices we have within Aspire, right?
Yeah, and as we move forward into the future, it's not just the fact that we're coming up with these new wireless standards and that more devices support it. It's that more devices are only Wi-Fi, and there's much more emphasis these days from your user base and your customers that I want wireless and I need wireless support absolutely in like a wireless first kind of mentality. So we're kind of seeing a shift. All of the devices that you use don't plug in anymore. Your tablets, your phones, and stuff like that.
Absolutely.
So there's a much bigger emphasis from both sides of the market, I think.
Yeah, not that many laptops have a Ethernet connection anymore, right? So yeah, that's certainly part of it, and also consider the fact that there is now, if you're building a new building, right, retrofitting a building, whatever it is, consider not having to pull cables to the 700 cubicles that you have, right? If we have a lot of customers that are going kind of Wi-Fi first or even Wi-Fi only, for their user base, and saving, right, the costs on the cabling component, the infrastructure cabling part, and investing in a better and more robust Wi-Fi network.
Very interesting. Let's talk through some of the applications for Wi-Fi 6.
Sure. Yeah, so as we talked about before, I mean, high density Wi-Fi is an area that Wi-Fi 6 is going to play really well in, right? Stadiums, airports, lecture halls, like I said, congregation areas, and any of those type of applications are going to be a really good fit for Wi-Fi 6. Also areas where you need low latency applications, right? Voice and video is, as you know, we have a motto here at Aspire that is everything on video, right? So we are constantly leveraging our voice and video capabilities, eating our own dog food, as you may. And all those devices, you know, require that kind of really high throughput in order to effectively run those applications. Augmented and virtual reality, right? I mean, this is something that really gets guys like us super excited, right? Think about all the possibilities of augmented or virtual reality, of being able to kind of, you know, let's say if Turk and I were working on a problem together. I'm on site somewhere, Turk is remote. There's nothing to say that I can't put VR goggles on and him as well. We're transmitting the image back and forth. He's telling me, okay, I see your hands, grab this device, plug this cable in, right? Okay, bring up your CLI, I see what you're doing, type this command. There's a lot of potential use cases there for augmented and virtual reality that get guys like us very excited. And then finally, as we discussed, I mean, indoor IoT. And I kind of specifically put indoor IoT in there, and you're one of the IoT guys, and I think we talk about this quite a bit, that if we're talking about outdoor IoT, the backhaul is going to be a bit different, right? We may be leveraging, you know, cellular 5G connections, we may be leveraging LoRa, 6LoWPAN, other Wi-Fi technologies, right? So when we talk about IoT, we're mostly talking about indoor, not necessarily carpeted space IoT, but indoor IoT. And again, the huge benefits there, the increased battery life and the decreased congestion. If you potentially have thousands of IoT devices all attempting to transmit their data, you know, it's a sensor that's maybe monitoring environmentals, right? All those are sending back that information back to a main dashboard. So to decrease that congestion and allow all those devices to transmit contemporaneously, there's huge benefits there as well.
And I think what you see here too is that a lot of the development from the augmented virtual reality and the IoT spaces, a lot of that development is pushing for these higher throughput and more efficient technologies like Wi-Fi 6 and 5G. Once these technologies get implemented and stabilized, I think you'll see a lot more of this development in these areas going a lot further than it currently is. Like, for example, Apple with their augmented reality glasses. That's going to require a lot of that new technology.
So sort of the complementary technologies having like a ladder effect on one another. So as this gets out there further, right, it enables these other technologies. Again, very interesting, right? So stadiums, airports, lecture halls. I'm sure everybody has been in a space like this recently, right? And you can, to your point, thinking of IoT and the environmental components, everything from temperature, moisture, types of sensors, right, that you may see. We've seen some of those devices that Mr. Shalacy talks about that are actually measuring water levels, so that you can understand, you know, when a basement or a data center or something important may be in risk of flooding. Actually, locally had a situation with a construction site that they backed up an access pipe that flooded and caused about $8 million worth of damage to a large housing development that would have been easily thwarted if a couple of IoT devices had been deployed, which you can start to see how some of these different sort of work sites and so forth could even benefit from it, and we get into that extra data and information. How can our teams help? Already, I think the concept of, you know, predictive survey, right, or even post-deployment survey, sort of fine-tuning. It sounds as though an organization could get the technology. Look, I want to get the appropriate access points and the appropriate switching infrastructure to support it, but that doesn't sound like that's the end of the story. It sounds like you really need some configuration and some tuning to make this work correctly based on the nature and type of space. Is that accurate?
Yeah, I would say so. I mean, when I think about this, I typically break Wi-Fi engineers up into two main buckets, right? A Wi-Fi engineer, at the very least, should be able to administer a wireless LAN controller and understand how to configure its access points and the components of that wireless LAN infrastructure. The other side of it is the RF side of it, right? So to be able to configure a LAN controller, that's great. That's awesome, right? But the ability to understand RF, how the RF is going to operate within an environment, the ability to perform these site surveys, as you mentioned, that's just the type of thing that you get with experience, right? I mean, so Turk is doing this 20 years,
Yeah.
right? Myself, 10 years. And so, we could spend hours talking about these type of things. We could spend 2 hours talking about an antenna for a specific application, right? In this application, and we may not always agree, and I typically defer to him based on the fact that, like I said, he has over a decade more experience than I do. But there's oftentimes a situation where we look at an environment, we look at a particular situation, and we say, okay, well, what type of antenna do we need here? What kind of radiation pattern are we looking for, right? What level of power do we have to provide in order to make sure that the coverage is accurate, right? So we talk as experts in RF. We talk about that designing the RF side of a wireless network is way more important than actually configuring controllers and access points, right? So we have this joke, some people say Wi-Fi is easy, right? And we do say this internally, and the reason we say that is because we have designed it properly from the beginning. The configuration of that wireless LAN controller and those access points then becomes kind of the low-hanging fruit, the moot point, the easy part of it. If you design that, wireless network correctly, then the rest of it's kind of gravy. Do you agree?
Yeah. I think that it's very important because this is one of the only things that your organization is going to be using that shares with the environment. You don't own anything that you're using to transmit over. So you have to be cautious. You have to assess your environment, make sure you have control over your space, and then be a good RF neighbor to all your other neighbors and environment to make sure that everybody can use this free medium to deliver efficient wireless communication.
Yeah. And so in terms of experience, right, and again, this is where our ability to design really shines through, right? So from an experience perspective, I mean, Turk has been working in warehouses, industrial mines, colleges, and higher ed for his entire career, right? I mean, obviously some of these things we work on together, but those are some of the most difficult environments out there, right? So for a guy like Turk that has been working in the mine industry, I think Quartz Mine, that was your Feldspar mines, right? Some of the most difficult environments out there. So think about if you come from the most difficult environment and then you go to a K through 12 application where it's reasonably less difficult, right? It kind of feels easy, right? So we were leveraging a ton of experience in a lot of different areas, and you would be kind of surprised at how sometimes those areas there's maybe not the best word, but cross-pollination of where we may be working on something and we'll say, I'll say, well, what do you think we should do here? And he'll say, well, when I used to work in the feldspar mines, we used to leverage an access point like this, right?
Yeah.
With this type of radiation pattern, and I found the greatest benefit there. And then obviously site survey capabilities, right? So the ability to perform these site surveys. I mean, we have the Ekahau logo on the lower right there. We are an Ekahau partner. We leverage Ekahau because we believe it's industry best site survey program out there, right? And we have, a lot of different capabilities from a site survey perspective, being predictive surveys, on-site pre-deployment surveys, on-site post-deployment surveys, surveys for point-to-point links, point to multi-point links, mesh surveys, right? These are all the things that we've done. So we have, like I said, we have a lot of experience. We are kind of a go-to partner within this area for diagnosing and troubleshooting, let's say, suboptimal designs that have been implemented by competitors or customers or other entities. So we get a lot of requests, which we're very happy about, to go in and troubleshoot different environments and to redesign them based on our experience, right? And then finally, our ability to manage these infrastructures for our customers going forward, right? We don't just design and implement and then cut and run, right? We have the ability to be with our customers and manage these environments going forward.
That's I hate to say that I really missed the fact that feldspar should have been the answer to one of our questions. So I want to apologize to everybody on the call because that's a gimme. I was thinking anthracite and you said feldspar. Darn it. That said, clearly our active amateur radio operator is Mr. Kyle Turk. You can look him up at the ARRL. I let mine lapse, so you can't find me. Should we talk about additional enhancements to Wi-Fi 6? I mean, what comes? I hate to say what comes next because it's sort of almost here. But what else? Are there components that get built on top of it? Also, a little bit more.
Yeah, I think the future of Cisco and the products that they're putting out, specifically speaking, DNA and automation. With DNA automation and assurance, Cisco's portfolio folds together quite nicely, where you can manage your whole Wi-Fi infrastructure from DNA Center and perform policies and enhancements on your network to provide a better management solution. And then DNA Spaces specifically deals with a customer experience. You might have heard of Cisco CMX, taking some of that location data and deriving valuable information for marketing and determining use cases in your environment with dwell times and location-based analytics. Cody, I don't know, do you have anything to add?
Question about that. So when we deploy a guest network, right, we may want to know, hey, students are hanging out at the coffee shop here, and so, again, that might inform public safety or other efforts that we have. Hey, this is a great place for us to, I don't know, have that busker, the musician hang out for some amount of time to sort of entertain people, or we may say, this is where we want to put the new display to sell more of our Valentine's Day chocolates. By the way, that's tomorrow, everybody. Just want you to know tomorrow is Valentine's Day, so don't forget. So DNA Spaces, that's interesting because I remember seeing CMX and that looked really powerful with the mapping and overlays and understanding where people move throughout a physical environment.
Right. I liked your example, right? Let's talk about a congregation area, right? DNA Spaces could provide you information on how many users are coming to that environment. And then that information or that data may feed back into the need for additional access points or additional capabilities, right? So let's say, traditionally, let's just to make the math easy, let's say an access point can handle 100 concurrent clients, right? We have one access point in a quad. We're seeing 250 to 300 users through DNA Spaces. We're seeing 250 to 300 users congregating in that quad at any given time in the day, right? That tells us now that we need to add an access point or two in order to be able to accommodate that additional bandwidth, right, or that additional need. Now, the other side where you really see this work really well in is retail, right? So let's say you have a store, your Macy's. You're noticing that the button-down shirts are being purchased at the same level that they used to be, right? Then you go to your DNA Spaces. You look at things like dwell time, how many new people are coming in, where they're going within the store. You find out that actually, if we were to move those button-down shirts to the front, right, or to a secondary entrance, that would increase the button-down shirt sales, right? So it's kind of this like DNA Spaces could be leveraged as a location platform, which is interesting for guys like us. Where are things? It's cool to show the triangulation of devices, and we get into that stuff. But there's also important as this kind of maybe let's call it a feedback loop or whatever to say, okay, how do we optimize either our wireless network or B, the location of our of the goods that we are intending to sell, right, in order to provide additional benefit to the user, or I'm sorry, to the company.
And then you can take that DNA Spaces data that you've accumulated, and they have the capability to integrate specialized APIs, and then take that data and represent it somewhere else to control some other business-driven analytics or business-driven process. Yeah.
Yeah, this is really interesting, and I may ask you to do some sort of demonstration of some of this at some point in the future, gentlemen, if that's okay.
Yeah.
Just because I mean this is that feedback loop, right? The kind of information that we can pull from these systems that is becoming more and more apparent, right? Where we have the technologies deployed and we can see what our human populations are doing, and then allowing us to feed that information back so that the organization can make effective business decisions, which is whether we're going to move things physically around, right? So like again, the retail environment, hey, we want people to go to the back of the store to get the thing so they see everything in the store. Or maybe it's a public safety congestion issue where you say, look, when students come onto campus, they all get stuck right here because there's some sort of thing, a sandwich shop or whatever it is in the student commons, and we want to actually have them flow better through in order to make the space work more effectively. This presents a lot of very interesting ideas, gentlemen. And in the interest of time, because as you mentioned, we could talk about this for probably a couple of hours. Let's do this. I'd like to let everybody know, again, a little bit more about Aspire. So we are a gold partner, master in security, collaboration, and as a service provider. Full suite of managed services served out of our 24/7 SOC and NOC. In Eatontown, New Jersey, we do have, of course, SOC analysts sprinkled around, all US based. Very important to remember that. Actually, Cody and Kyle, you were both talking before we hopped on the call that you're working on enterprise networking master. So we're continuing to grow both the size of the organization as well as what our certified capabilities are, which is really exciting. So I know you've put a lot of time and effort into that. That's a lot of work.
Yeah, so we completed the technical check-in in January, the end of January. That went swimmingly well. So now we're in the throes of the sales check-in as well as the foundations component. So we are, let's say, 60% there, and now it's just kind of driving that last 40% over the finish line. So we're very excited to be able to announce that and add that logo to our slides moving forward.
That's super exciting. So we're regularly recognized by both Cisco and industry associations, right, based on our growth and the projects that we're doing. So Cisco, love to point out that we are both their SLED Partner of the Year for various years at different times, right? And we've been named their Execution Partner, which is something that I like a lot because that just shows when we do a project for and in partnership with a customer, we work to accomplish that project in a very positive outcome. So I've seen that firsthand multiple times, and that's where things get exciting. We are visionary. We have a lot of very strong experts like the gentlemen that we have spoken with here today, Kyle and Cody. Again, thank you so much for participating and sort of sharing some of this information, as well as, again, some of our past participants and presenters like Mr. Brian Shalacy, Carter Yepson, our upcoming Mr. Kevin Leahy, Mr. Rob Costanza, and again, we are growing.
Well, just one thing to note there, Josh. So I was at Partner Summit November of last year, and so we won Execution Excellence Partner of the Year for the East and SLED Partner of the Year for the East in 2019 as well. So those are 2-year running, 2018, 2019.
Thank you. I can update that one. So that's very important to know. Again, we continue to perform. I love the Execution Excellence one. I think that's really,
Me too.
Really cool. The advantage of working with Aspire, right, is we are all about business integration. It's not simply the concept of, hey, this box or this piece of equipment. It's about how does this impact your organization, whether, again, it is an educational environment, a production environment, a research environment, whether you have a ton of knowledge workers. We're all about, again, operations management. So making sure that your IT team is seen as a very strategic component of the way your organization makes decisions. And again, I think that last bit that you gentlemen talked about is really a great example of that, right? Let's take the feedback from some of these systems and start to show it to our C-suite and our executives and our leadership to say, hey, let's make physical changes here too. Again, a novel idea, call me crazy. And then thought leadership. So speaking with, again, individuals like our wonderful experts, presenters today, getting out in front of changing, updating standards, new ways to do things. That goes back to being visionary, growing, and then, again, our ability to be very nimble and operate with our customers. I would like to give a plug. Our upcoming Techcast will be in March around data with Mr. Kevin Leahy, our practice director for our data center practice. We will then move on the following month with Mr. Robert Costanza to talk about security and identity services. A lot of really interesting things there that Robert has been educating me on lately. So I look forward to that. For feedback or to get started with us, if you have questions, if you have ideas, if you're watching this as a recording and you say, hey, I've got to reach out and find out more, please shoot us an email at sales@aspiretransforms.com. You can reach me at dolby@aspiretransforms.com. Thank you for taking the time out of your day to join us for another in the Aspire Techcast series. We greatly appreciate your time and have a wonderful rest of your day.
Thank you for joining the Aspire Technology Partners Techcast. For more information about us, please visit www.aspiretransforms.com or call us at 732-847-9600 to speak to one of our experts. For Aspire Technology Partners, this is Josh Dolby.